Welcome to Sidecar Games. My name is Dustin, and today we are on the reflection episode of our Axiom Verge playthrough. This is not a review. It is not a true analysis. It's really just a moment to sit down and have a conversation about our first playthrough of the game. If we wanted to do a real analysis, I'd have to play through the game many more times. I just finished a hard playthrough, 42% of the items collected. There's still a lot more to the game that I need to do. So that this series on our channel is run more like a book club. We just play through a game together, we discuss it in the comments, and then this reflection video is kind of a culmination of those discussions. So, since we have the benefit of having played through another Metroidvania game on this series so far, we're going to do some compare and contrast, but most of it is going to be more reader response. I think we're going to, or player response, rather. So we're going to kind of avoid the more complicated, the more laborious forms of literary criticism like structuralism, psychoanalytic theory, you know, bringing in Jungian archetypes and whatnot. We could do eventually maybe feminist literary criticism. I'd be curious to see what Simone de Beauvoir would have to say about a game where the only female characters are giant war machines who, after birthing the male protagonist, proceed to lie, manipulate, and betray and murder him. And the last fight, which is in a very phallic elevator shaft where the female characters are dependent on a male protagonist to finish the boss. Yeah, I'm just trying to tell you how far into the rabbit hole we can go. We're not going to do that today. I think if we eventually wanted to get into those more complicated forms of literary criticism, we'd probably do a summary episode to get everyone on the same page. I haven't done these kinds of analysis in a really long time at any kind of regular interval, so this is me just kind of stretching the muscle and getting more into it. So I think as we go through this series, we're going to get a little bit more complicated, but for the most part, it's just going to be a casual conversation. So I think where I want to start with, these games kind of have three main points. So you have the gameplay, you have the world, the exploration, and then you have the world and exploration I consider one thing, and then you have the gameplay. So we're going to start with gameplay. Gameplay, the core gameplay is really solid. I think the problem that occurred is when you bring into account the traversal abilities. We saw that in Salt and Sanctuary, we saw that with the brands. Just a means of the developer kind of directing you where he wants you to go, he or she wants you to go, and then also giving you abilities that lets you surpass those obstacles in order to progress into new areas. And so in Axiom Verge, those things manifested themselves as originally the hack. We got the hack, which is used in both combat and in traversal. There were a few barriers that you had to hack to get through them. You had the grappling hook, which I thought was kind of underutilized. I only really used it in one area. I'm sure you need it to get to more complicated weapons in the game, but on a first playthrough, that wasn't my experience. And then the drone, the remote drone, who we called Heizen, was awesome. I loved him. I love that, like a Metroid, you have the ball that you can use to get into smaller spaces. I love that this was not actually a part of ourselves. We had to throw it out. We had to summon it back. It had its own health bar. And then the ability to teleport to it was awesome. In my after beating the game, I did some preliminary research when preparing for this video. And then I found it's really used in speedruns. I think that's really cool. I love how the game supports speedruns. It's got its own little section. It removes all the cutscenes. It gives you the timers and everything. I think that's really cool. My problem with the gameplay is when you get into the porting abilities. So you get the first ability to pass through barriers. You can pass through one block really slowly. That gets upgraded to passing through 2 blocks at a faster speed. And then you finally get I think it's the final one, I don't know, but the final lab coat, which lets you teleport through 3 blocks, and then you damage everything as you pass through it. I really, really hate that it is bound to a double tap on your controller. I was playing it on PS4. Most of the time I used the analog stick. I actually kind of went back and forth between using analog stick and the directional pads based on what I was doing. It was really frustrating that I could never get that down clean. Oftentimes I would do it when I didn't mean to do it. Oftentimes when I tried doing it, it wasn't as accurate as I wanted it to be. That was really frustrating, especially in a game where the precision of your inputs is very, very important. And I was thinking about it, and I was wondering if it may have been a reaction to having to put it on the Vita. I know originally Happ had the intention of releasing it, I think, at the same time on Vita and PS4. The Vita doesn't have the benefit of having the L3, R3 buttons or the L2, R2 buttons. I was wondering if they wanted to kind of reduce the number of buttons that you had to use in the game. It was a bummer that you couldn't remap it. It seemed like it was the only ability that you couldn't remap in the settings. It was unfortunate. I think it could have had... I think you could have used that for combat quite a bit, and it didn't end up being very consistent. And it ended up getting me killed. I tried to do something. I was like, oh, hey, I need to get up to there. I'll get up to there when I'm fighting a guy, and I wouldn't make it, and something awful would happen, then I ended up dying. It was quite frustrating for me on my first playthrough. So, it is what it is. What else do we got? So we got gameplay. We're going into, I think, boss battles. I think we saw the same thing in Axiom Verge as we saw in Salt and Sanctuary. I think there is I would say the bosses in Salt and Sanctuary are a little stronger. I think Athetos is probably the most interesting boss in the game. I think that was a really clever boss fight, having to manipulate the sentries so you don't take as much damage. I thought that was really cool. I think it's Uku. It's Ukho. It's the wasp boss. Having to use the hack in order to hack the little drones that it sends out, and then use those based on timing and placement on the boss to deal massive amounts of damage. I thought that was clever. I thought that was really cool. But most of the boss, it ended up me being on one side and the boss on the other, and I would find some spot where he couldn't hit me, and I just hit him a bunch. So I know there's definitely more creative ways to beat them quicker, but as far as the first playthrough on hard, it didn't seem like there was a lot of innovating design as far as like platforming and other things in the game. And I think we saw that in Salt and Sanctuary. I think we had discussed that the Tree of Men was really the only boss in the game that utilized platforming. In a platforming game, I feel like you'd use it a little bit more. It was a little odd that you couldn't use Heisen in the... Sorry, not Heisen. We call him Heisen, the remote drone. The remote drone in the boss fights, I think that would have been cool if they would have implemented something with that as well. I know he would have kind of bypassed a few bosses by being able to crawl under them and stuff like that, but I think you can design a game around the abilities that you've already given. It's a little odd that they pull back abilities when you go into a boss fight. So, the world itself was... It wasn't super interesting to explore. I think the differences between the areas were a little arbitrary, but I don't think that is a... And it's not based on the graphics. I think it's just based on the lore itself. I don't think, even after beating the game, I did some research on the areas, and it didn't seem like there's a lot of history on the areas. It didn't seem like there's a lot of purpose to the areas, like we saw in Salt and Sanctuary. The animation was simple but elegant, and I think the simplicity is definitely on purpose. I think Thomas Happ definitely did it. I'm not going to do a review that ignores... It's not death of the developer here, where we definitely want to pull in his intentions when designing the game. He was definitely writing a love letter to the original Metroid. The original Metroid was really based on building the world around those cubes, those blocks of minimal color. So I think most of the cubes in Axiom Verge are, I think, 3 colors at most. It's clearly not him not being able to do better. The animation that we saw with the Rusalki at the end of the game, clearly he's a very talented pixel artist. The simplicity of the game was just to really reminisce about these older titles. So the world building was really Metroid. I think the combat was really Super Metroid. Being able to fire in 8 directions, that's very Super Metroid. But I think what we saw as the Metroid series went on is the areas became very more unique. The areas became very more bound in the story itself. Based on the quests that you were on, I think you'd see those... kind of that story element play a part in the design of that area, and I don't think we saw that in Axiom Verge. Maybe we'll see that in Axiom Verge 2. Who knows? So I think the story that was the most interesting part of the game, and I think that's really what kept me going, along with the discussion with you guys. I think that is the only thing that really interested me in the game. And it was very different from playing Salt and Sanctuary. Salt and Sanctuary presented you the story in a really vague way. Most of the story was written in item descriptions, in really vague conversations with people throughout the map. Playing a game where the story was a little bit more at the forefront was a nice change. I still love the way that Salt and Sanctuary told its story, but it was just a nice change when we started playing this game with the intrigue of the story itself. A lot of the contradictions really made you think and theorize about what was going to happen, and that was a lot of fun to discuss with you guys. So this is so the story. There's a lot of contradictions. The way it was presented to us, there was a lot of contradictions, and that was what was kind of making me jump back and forth on my theories of what was going on. So the contradictions that I noticed on my first playthrough were whatever. The way that you got to Sudra. So Sudra, regardless of whether it's a physical location or a non-physical location, which I think the non-physical is probably more likely. There's a lot of references to coding that we talked about in the comments. Kaiser was very forthcoming with telling us about what terms are coding terms, which makes me think it is not a physical location. But originally, the story kind of makes you believe that Ophelia went out to Earth, identified Earth, went out to Earth, and got you and brought you here, right? Later in the story, it turns out that's clearly not true. They recreated you from data based on Thetos getting there earlier. So that was a contradiction originally. And then once you get to the end of the game, once you know that you're a clone, once you know that you were never actually on Earth, you're just data from Earth, the idea that they're going to send you back to your body was odd to me. I'm like, we've never been there. We are just a recreation. We're not even the original. How are you going to send us back in time and get us to our body and then somehow cure us? So that was a big problem that I had at the end of the game. Also, it seemed like the Thetos' intentions when he went to Sudra, and the reason that the Rusalki told you that they he wiped out all the Sudrans was because he wanted to use Sudra as a means of getting to other worlds. So Sudra was a hub for travel originally, and the Sudrans were the ones who kind of coordinated that travel. But when he got there, they had become a very xenophobic community. Their technology, the story is kind of the Sudran story is very Isaac Asimov Foundation series, where technology gets to a point where it's so powerful that it just works, and people stop thinking about how it works and how to repair it, that eventually it just becomes more of a religion and becomes a mystical entity, and they lose focus on, they lose the knowledge of how to keep their technology working, or that the technology is just technology. It's not some mystical element. So when he gets there, they have brought the breach around the planet in order to protect themselves. So his whole motivation at that point was to get rid of the Sudrans and then release the breach, right? But then he doesn't do that. He stays there and keeps the breach intact and hides himself on the other side of the breach. Which, why would he do that if his intention was to let people from Earth go to this new location, this new utopian society that he's found, where they have technology that'll end war and disease, all those things. So why would he stay there? That didn't make sense to me. And then I had a theory that he didn't do that. I had a theory that it was maybe the Rusalki were the ones who released the pathogen. But then he admits at the end of the game that he did release the pathogen, and then I was very, very confused. So those are just some of the contradictions that I had in the story itself. And it turns out that I'm not the only person who noticed these things, and it seems like the game really supports the theory that, yes, it was the Rusalki who released the pathogen. So the Rusalki released the pathogen to kill the Sudra. So the Sudra, they brought the breach around the planet, and that was really harmful to the Rusalki. It forced them to be on the planet. It damaged many of them. And so the theory is that they released the pathogen to kill the Sudrans. And the one Rusalki that you met throughout the game, she was dead already, but they said that she had sided with Thetos at some point. They didn't want the Sudrans to die. That was not their intention. And there were other Rusalki killed that Rusalki. I think Kalaska, I think is her name. I could be wrong. Something like that. They had killed her and used her nanogates to protect Trace. But Thetos, at the end of the game, when he confirms that he was the one who released the pathogen, he says something right before that lets you assume that maybe he might not have been telling the truth. He tells you that the Rusalki will kill him if, or not kill Thetos, kill Trace if Thetos tells Trace the truth. And then he says that, yes, I'm the one who released the pathogen. So the theory is that Thetos was actually trying to encase The reason that he didn't release the breach is because he knew that the Rusalki no longer had any they're not tethered to Sudra anymore, because originally their program was to protect the Sudrins, but now that they're all dead, they're free to go about their business. And if Atheros releases the breach, then the Rusalki can go anywhere and do anything. And these are giant war machines, and Earth wouldn't be capable of protecting itself from them if they were to go to Earth. So the reason he says that I'm the one who that released the pathogen is because he knew he was going to die. There was a guy here who was in good health, was helping the Rusalki, and the Rusalki were easily capable of destroying him. So instead of telling him, hey, the Rusalki are actually the ones who murdered... The Rusalki are actually the ones who released the pathogen. He told him something that would keep him alive. He let him believe that it was him, and then, of course, Trace helps destroy Atheros, even though that wasn't his original intention. So at the end of the game, when you supposedly go back to your body, you don't actually go back to your body, because you're a clone. You never were on Earth. That was never you. All you were in is a hallucination. If you get a high percentage at the end of the game of items found, you get an additional cutscene at the end where Atheros comes into your world at the end and kills you with a gun. And the assumption is that you are in kind of you're in a hallucination. You're unconscious, which is why we see you at the bottom of the credits. At the end of the credits, you see Trace in his red coat, lying at the base of what looks like some giant technological monster. And the reason you're there is because you're unconscious. You're in this dream state. And Atheros coming into your dreams and killing you is essentially your body or some other outside source trying to wake you up from that dream, which would then lead into essentially Axiom Verge 2 to see what happens after the Rusalki are released from this planet now that the breach attractor has been destroyed. So the story is really good. I love that it's not all out there in the open. I love that you have to kind of do some research afterwards. I'm sure you get a huge benefit by getting more of the items. I'm, of course, going to go back through the game, 100% the game. Got to get that platinum. Excited to jump on it on my Vita. Excited that Salt and Sanctuary is on Vita now. I got those two games to platinum. Super excited. What else can we talk about? I did enjoy the game. I'm not trying to be too critical of the game itself. I understand the purpose of the game. I understand that Happ wasn't trying to make the best Metroidvania game in existence. He was trying to make something that would kind of bring you back nostalgic. It'd be nostalgic for you as you pass through the game, and I think he did a really good job of that. I'm excited to see what he does with Axiom Verge 2. I wonder if he'll maybe develop the world like Metroid. Maybe the first game is a little bit more like the original Metroid. Maybe Axiom Verge 2 would be a little more like Super Metroid. That'd be really cool. Not even sure if he wants to make a Metroid or an Axiom Verge 2, but we'll just have to find out. So we're going to continue our adventures in Metroidvania games. We've played 2 already. I got a second one already lined up. Excited to jump into it on Wednesday. The game that we are going to be playing is called Hollow Knight. I'm super excited. My buddy Chris has been talking this game up. Obviously, no spoilers, but he's been saying the combat's a lot of fun. He's been saying the world is a lot of fun. The map system is great. Really excited to jump into it. It's made by an Australian developer, Team Cherry. This is their first game. Came out in February, I believe. It's on PC. It's on the Switch. I'll probably be playing it on the Switch. Kind of bummed out there's no trophies, but I really cannot wait until it comes out on PS4. So I'm going to play it now on the Switch. Please pick it up. Please join me in my adventure. It's always more fun when more people are playing along and experiencing the game. You'll probably pass me up because I only play, half hour, 3 times a week. But I'm really excited to get into it. It's got really good reviews. I hear it's a little buggy right now. I'm not sure if that's still true. But it looks really good. It's another hand-drawn game. Much like Salt and Sanctuary. The art style is really pretty. You're a bug, as you can see from the thumbnail. So yeah, that is the next adventure we're going to have. Eventually, I think we'd like to get into like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, the original Metroid, Super Metroid, but I'm not sure if those are going to be played on this series or we're going to play that on our Classically Trained series, because I think we're just about to beat The World Is Not Enough, and then we have another game after that, and then after that we might play something like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, unless I want to hold that for this series, but I'm not positive. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really want to thank you guys for following this series. It was so much fun just talking about the story. I'm hoping that this next game has a lot of fun things to discuss as far as story. It sounds like it's a little vague. The story is told kind of like I think the reason I'm picking this game is because I think it's a really good medium point between Axiom Verge and Salt and Sanctuary. Salt and Sanctuary is very Castlevania, Dark Souls, and then you have Axiom Verge, which is just straight true Metroid game. And I think this next game is a little similar. It kind of bridges the gap between those two games. I think it's dark. I think it's a little more. Salt and Sanctuary was very grounded. You took fall damage, things that were common in the Dark Souls games, and then Axiom Verge is very jumpy. I don't want to say floaty because I think floaty is a bad term, but it definitely wasn't grounded at all. And I think this next game is kind of in between of those things. So I'm really excited to have a really dark game that does have some more arcadey gameplay, if that even makes sense. So thank you guys so much for. I want to thank Kaiser. I want to thank Aqua. Thank you guys so much for following the series. Hot Pile of Garbage. Thanks for jumping in. You got caught up right at the end. You guys make this so much fun to do, and I'm excited to jump into the new game. So I'll see you guys on Wednesday with some Hollow Knight. See you guys later.